getting ready to start our conversation for today. This is going to be a two-part conversation. And we want to thank Senator Mark Lizarraga for joining us this morning. Of course, he's the senator representing the business sector. Good morning.
Good morning, Senator.
Both, and thanks for having me.
And this is perhaps your forte in terms of looking at the numbers and the implications it can have. But let's start off with just your general impression of the latest budget that has been presented.
More of the same. More of the same. It is, you know, I could get long-winded on this, but in a nutshell, what we're seeing is overall, all departments came in at 10 million under spending, projected spending. But overall, we're spending $35 million more in this last fiscal year. And where did that increase in spending come from? One guess, Marlene. Where do you think it came from? Ministry of Works.
Okay.
$45 million over budget. So we had, if one were to follow the rules on how you expend money, we had urgent and unforeseen spendings in the Ministry of Works to the tune of $45 million last year. So in a nutshell, it's more of the same. Where I say where are the priorities, I looked at a lot of the different areas that have been cut, that spent less than were allocated. And under normal circumstances, that would be a good thing. But if you look at the essential areas in the budget that have been cut, and if we have time,
Essential areas like?
In health, in housing, in social services, you know.
Let me stick up in here, not to be cynical or anything. It's just an honest question I'm about to ask you.
You can be cynical.
Did you expect anything different, though? I mean,
none at all.
If
None
this
at all.
seems to be
This
the
has been the
modus
trend.
operandi of the present administration, would you have expected anything to be different from what was presented last year or the year before? Something radically different?
One would hope that it would have seen this realization that, look, we have to take care of the needs of our people. That's why you go to Balmapan, you know, to take care of the needs of the people. There are a couple of reports that I would like to make reference to sometime in the show that shows us that we're failing in some basic things. Not my reports, but international reports and reports done in conjunction with the government of Belize. Jobs, for example, you know, we have a severe issue with the creation of new jobs. We have a severe issue with the productivity of our workforce in this country, and international studies are showing that. So you look to see if the government is changing its focus and say, look, okay, maybe I could back off on infrastructure a little bit, and maybe I could start making human spending or human capacity building or competitiveness building more of an issue than strictly this investment that's heavily lopsided towards infrastructure.
And
that formula is not working because it has not lowered our taxes, it has not lowered the cost of living, it has not given us more housing, it has not given us better health care, it has not given us a more affordable education. You know what I'm saying?
But here's the thing, right? When you, and this is just my observation, you're looking at two political parties that when they come into government have certain philosophies that they are strict with. So for instance, we're saying that this particular government focuses heavily on infrastructure, whereas the PUP government of the past spent more on human capacity building. But in a sense, those can be seen as extremes, because the happy medium would be that you have enough being invested in infrastructure and enough being invested in human capacity building, which would be an ideal. What would you respond to that?
I think it has to be a balance. It can't be heavily lopsided on any one side, as we have seen. I mean, I think in many instances, if you'll allow me to just give you some brief examples, let's look at the medicine and technology section of the Ministry of Health, right? They had a budget approved of $21,500,000 they've expended $18,800,000. Last year we spent over $19 million. So that has been cut, it has gone down. Now, is it that our health services are so advanced? Is it that we're so well advanced in medicine, we're taking care of all our medicine needs, or laboratory testing and stuff? When you look at lab equipment, when we had a budgeted sum of only $26,000 for lab equipment, but yet we only spend $7,000. So, do we have enough lab equipment in this country? What is the reason that we're not spending or investing, right, in lab equipment to that tune? So, and there are many other examples. For example, spares for equipment. We budgeted $76,000 this year. Yeah, last year we spent $116,000. This year we budgeted $76,000 and only spent $46,000. Is it that we have enough spares for equipment in the hospitals? I don't think so, because when I talk to the medical people, that's not the impression that I get. When you look at medical supplies again, medical supplies and medicines and stuff, they budgeted $17 million, we only spent $15 million. There's a $2 million cut. So why? One has to question, have we really covered all the needs? And then there are other areas where you can see, for example, the hypocrisy in this budget. Because if you look at the Ministry of Human Development, Social Transformation, in 2019-2020, we spent $400,000 on what they call poverty alleviation. We budgeted, $400,000. This coming year is an election year, right? You know how much we budgeted this year for that? $2.5 million. You know how much we budget for the following year? $500,000. So you go from 400 to 2.5 in an election year, down back to 500. Does that mean we'll eliminate poverty in 1 year? In the election year?
What accounts for the boost in just this year?
And what accounts for that tremendous multiplier? You see what I'm saying? Right? And there are other examples like that. When you look at the
See, and I think that what you raised is perhaps a critical point, because it can be used as a counter argument in terms of balancing out all the infrastructure investment. I want to step back to that for a second, because this has been, the budget is called Making Every Dollar Count. And there were a couple things I think that the Prime Minister noted in his budget presentation that are worthwhile to address. So he clearly says that he knows that the international agencies would like to push the nation in a different direction, but that his budget will address the needs of the people. And how is that done? No new taxes, public wages are maintained, increments will be met, pensions will be met, and of course, the very large, heavy investment. And I always have a challenge with saying infrastructure, because infrastructure can mean many things. It can mean housing projects, water projects, but it's roads. It's roads that we're talking about. That's the primary basis of where the money is going.
Yeah, I agree.
So, in looking at what...
And it's going to be increased in this budget year.
Yes.
It's going to be increased in this budget year.
Now, the argument can be that good roads allow for good passage or easier passage for, agricultural products. So, in other words, for your sugar that wants to head south, they'll love the coastal road.
There is no disputing the fact that you have to have good roads in a country. Yes. But do you have to have highways to nowhere when you have a hospital that's being occupied by raccoons? Do you have to have a road to nowhere when you have rats in one of the major hospitals in our country, infestation? Do you have to have that type of infrastructure development at the cost of the other infrastructure that more directly impacts your humans?
Okay, let me ask a question here without
So yes, the vehicles in the country are better off. Transportation is easier, right? We have good roads. Yes, there's no disputing that. But what happened to our people? What happened to the quality and the effect of our largest investment, which is in education, and the jobs that we should be creating for those people that we're educating?
So what about the argument that infrastructure work or building roads, let's be more specific, offers new jobs in a community?
Yes, it does, short term, while the project is going on, undoubtedly. But are they sustainable? Can we sustain this? No. We continue to say that. If you look at the money, for example,
Hold on, Senator, hold on. Let me interject quickly here.
But you have to give me a chance for answer when Marlene.
Look, if we're saying based on the construction of new roads, right, and you're saying roads that go to nowhere, I think we're talking about the Caracol Road in that instance, right?
Well, no,
but
the secondary road on the boom to 8 Mile.
Yeah, the airport
Airport link, thank you.
The point that I'm getting at, however, is that perhaps with the creation of new thoroughfares, you have expansion of communities, which in a sense is part of development, is it not?
That can be argued as well. It can be argued as well, but I'm saying to you that one has to question priorities and whether there's a saying that says, while the grass they grow, the grass is starved. Are our people's basic needs being taken care of now? Our business is growing. Tax income will show that. Okay? If you look at the numbers, it doesn't back up that trickle-down effect that you're talking about. It just does not. I wanted to touch briefly on two reports, if you would allow me to, and just briefly, this first one I'm going to quote from is the IMF report, recent IMF report, and it says that we continue to run current account deficits. In other words, we stay to borrow, right? That's basically what it means, that we're spending more than we're making, and we have to meet that shortfall from borrowing, okay? We had 7.9 in 18 as a percentage of GDP, that gap, 7.7 in 17. In 19, we had 4.5%, and this 2020, we have 6% of GDP. So it means we continue to follow the same path. In other words, there's no change. We're living beyond our means. It says a primary surplus. In other words, we're supposed to have, when you look at your income and your taxes that first round, look, we're supposed to gonna leave surplus. We had targeted, actually we had promised our bondholders that we're gonna run a 2% primary surplus. And if we never hit that 2% primary surplus, they could do a recall. They could call and call a demand on the bonds. I don't know if anybody's remembering that. I'm going to remind them of that fact. But we continue to do the same thing, live off borrowed money, and that is not sustainable. They warn as well of what they call external risks, which would impact tourism. That sound familiar now? Right? Natural disasters, to which Belize remains highly vulnerable. Elevated crime rates pose risks to growth and competitiveness. Crime rates affect us, we've spoken about that before. Reputational risks from potential financial misuse of the international financial services sector. Okay? And governance concerns, that sound familiar? Okay? Could weaken investor confidence and renew pressure on correspondent banking. That's another big issue. It says, an intensification of structural reforms could further raise investment, income, and employment. This is to quote them. So that's why the business community and the unions and the NGO community has come together and said, look, for make we address the issues, we have to address some core reform issues. That's one point.
But that's why I started by saying that the Prime Minister was very clear in being, my word, dismissive of what the international financial institutions are suggesting.
Well,
and it's always been
strange that the Prime Minister quotes them.
But it's always been argued that agencies like IMF, perhaps, they don't necessarily look at the human interest of a country, but more of the overall economic factors.
Look, again, it's amazing how they listen to advice and quote these international national institutions, somebody in the house say, oh, they're coming to us and they want to lend us money, right? So it's amazing how they use them when they want and ignore them when they want.
Yeah.
It's a matter of convenience.
Yes,
Right?
but let me not only depend on the international organizations. Let me quote you briefly from this document that's called Belize Key Jobs Challenges. And it was done in consultation with the Ministry of Labor, Human Development, Government Belize, Statistical Institute of Belize, and the World Bank. And it says Belize labor force has been growing faster than the economy, causing average labor productivity to fall. It means basically we're not employing all the people, we're not putting them to use, and we're not to get on certain throughput that we should out of them. It says job-rich growth will come from productivity gains within sectors, not from structural change. In other words, it have to come from the productive side of the economy. Not the government can make structural change and create jobs. We have to do it. Youth unemployment is high, and we need to focus on them. No, what's interesting is labor productivity growth in agriculture. We come in, there's a ranking, we come in at 83 out of 101 countries, number 83, we're there way down in agriculture. In productivity growth industries, we come in 89 out of 101. We're at the bottom again. And labor productivity in services, we come in 96 out of 101. So where are our priorities? We're spending over a quarter of our budget on education, and this is what we get for it. We're investing over a quarter of our budget on education, and we are saying to the world, we don't have a productive workforce.
Well, are you suggesting that there should be less investment in education?
No, I'm not suggesting. I'm
or
saying
it should be balanced out with investment.
If you are investing in education, thank you very much.
Okay.
So you work with business, you work with industry, you focus on them, on how do we help you to grow so you could hire more people. That has to be a priority. I'm saying you could take some of that investment that you have made, that you've benefited from really, because these institutions have a lot of liquidity and low cost money right now. We're lucky in that the money that's available right now is low cost money. Years ago, the cost of money international was high. Now, if you look at the treasury notes in the States, etc., the yields are 1% or less. So the cost of money has come down internationally. All that I believe is come down proportionately.
From this perspective.
But go ahead.
Let me argue from this perspective. One would say, well, it's not incumbent on government solely to be the one to create new jobs. It would be driven primarily by the
But that's
business
not what we're
sector.
saying. That's not what we're saying.
No, that's not what you're saying.
But I'll tell you what. It's the government that has been primarily employing. Why do I say that? And the thing is, this government don't even know how much employees they have. The Prime Minister in his presentation says we have 14,000 public service, but yet if you go to this book, it shows you over 16,000 an odd. The Prime Minister is underreporting in his budget speech.
But the government,
20%, so he don't know that we have 20% more. We know that.
There are too many people.
Because the government has become
service.
the employer of last resort. People can't find jobs, so you go to your area rep and say, what, and then they get a job for them in government. That's not the ideal. Our government is too big and we're too unproductive. Government is too unproductive. And so we, as a whole country, we have to invest in research and development. We have to invest in new technology. We have to invest in working with companies. When you look at the amount of money that's being invested in the private sector in this thing, it's a farce too. Right? After all these years, they still give lip service to this type of development. Their whole thing is centered around infrastructure. And that is not working because we're going more and more into debt.
Well, I mean, my question would be, where are the returns? We're now 12 years into one administration. If we go back into all the infrastructure investment that's been made, I don't know if we've ever done a proper analysis to see whether or not this type of infrastructure has led to any actual gains in our economy. I want to go back to looking at the performance of the GDP last year. We had a 0.3% increase. However, the last 3 quarters, there was no growth. In fact, there was actually a decline. Now, we had a conversation with the Statistical Institute of Belize. I'm going to get to that. And I asked them the very same question. Now, textbook, 2 consecutive quarters means we're in a recession. However, their explanation is that there are other factors that come into play, looking at banking issues and a number of other indicators. So we're not quite there yet. However, looking ahead, the expected drought, the impact of the new global outbreak, and other issues as well, we are not necessarily gearing ourselves up to be able to see any improvement within the near future. Is this budget creating any space for a shift or preparing us for the eventuality that we will be facing a recession?
I have not completed exhaustively my review of this budget, to be honest with you. I've done some preliminary review. So I can't answer that honestly.
What are some areas that would need investment? If the country is heading into hard times, and it's not just us, I mean, this is a global issue as well. What are some of the areas that we would need to see the government being able to allocate funds to ensure that we don't have devastating effects on the people?
Well, first of all, what I would like to see is for the government to become a little more vocal in educating and communicating on this issue. I think this needs to be a concerted effort by everyone. I think the government, the opposition, the the social partners, the business people need to come in, because we're going to all be affected if this thing becomes a reality in Belize. And most people say it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And to what degree, we don't know yet. Hopefully the measures that we'll put into place will be able to afford us a low impact and not a high impact.
You're talking the new coronavirus.
Right, the new coronavirus, of course. Now, I haven't looked at the budget in any significant way or deep enough to tell you if allocations have been made for that. But what
I can say, just to provide some clarity there, last Wednesday, I believe it was, Tuesday or Wednesday, the Ministry of Health held a press brief in Belmopan where the Minister of Health himself, coming out of last Tuesday's cabinet meeting it was, that $1 million has been earmarked to deal with the coronavirus outbreak, should there be one in Belize, right?
That's just from the Ministry of Health, you're saying?
Yeah. So, but the question is, if $1 million is, while we have no reported cases yet, the question remains, is $1 million sufficient to be able to address such an issue?
Well, we don't know yet, because we don't know what the impact will be if and when it comes. But the workers of the hospital issued a release. Have you seen that release? And they expressed major concerns, as do I, after having listened to them and spoken to some of them. And in other words, do we have a facility? Let's say we need to have lots of people quarantined. Let's put worst case scenario. Do we want those people to be quarantined, or do we want those people to even be attended to in our national referral hospital, where all the other major cases of illnesses, etc., are referred to? No, I would say no. Do we have a space allocated for quarantining these people if we have masks? Have we made provisions, or are we thinking of making provisions, for example, to help employees, to help businesses, small businesses, and even large businesses remain afloat? We see countries providing stimulus. I noticed the IMF has said that it is willing to loan and even grant monies to countries. Have we started to put together some sort of a plan proposal? I haven't seen it.
Well, I have to say, because we have interviewed the Ministry of Health
Okay.
quite a few times here, that there are some plans in place. Now, whether or not everyone is in agreement with those
Yeah.
plans is a different story. I saw the KHMH talk of PPEs, the protective gears. We were told that there are some that have been on reserve and will be deployed when we, in fact, start to see new cases.
I think
And
that-
but my question was, it wasn't as short term as looking at what happens when we get a case. It's more long term.
Right.
There's going to be a global impact of this outbreak, fueled by two things. One is looking at the impact of the disease itself, people out of work, but secondly, just the panic that it has created. You're talking about people, about countries quarantining millions of people,
60 million people in Italy.
demanding that any person who enters the country self-quarantines. Now, I hear the cries when people say, well, maybe Belize should do that. But can we? Because if we look at a tourist who's coming into the country for 2 weeks vacation, do they want to self-quarantine? And
Well-
if they don't come, what's the implication of that? So I'm saying, when we look long-term, there's no way to know definitively what the impact will be, but we do know there's most likely to be an impact. We see what's happening in the stock market in the US. We know China was shut down for a significant amount of time.
Look, the first thing I think we need to do is we need to organize and come out with a national education plan. That's the first thing that we urgently need. We have too much people getting information
Yeah.
from all over the place. We have to have a national education campaign right away to keep our people updated, and it needs to be
Yeah.
constant. That's one. Two, we have to start making provisions. For example, our largest leg that we stand on right now economically is tourism.
That's right.
What will be the plan? What will be the ramifications to our budget?
Yeah.
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 Right? What will be the ramifications to our budget if we have a major impact on the tourism sector?
Because that budget is
What will be-
created with an assumption of the amount of money you're going to collect.
Look, what will be the impact, for example, if our healthcare workers, and they've threatened it in their notice, decide that I'm not going to be working in the hospital because I'm afraid that I will get sick, I don't feel safe, you haven't done enough to protect me and my family, right? I don't have insurance, I don't have a whole host of things, I don't feel safe in this environment. So there are a lot of issues that we should have started to talk about long ago and plan. Now maybe some of it is being done, I don't know, but we need to start hearing from whosoever are making these plans. We need to hear from the Prime Minister. We need to hear from government,
But there-
from the opposition. We need to get these people together to have a national plan.
Yeah.
This is not a partisan thing.
And I agree, but what I'm saying is, because I really, that's one of the questions that's been lingering. If we look at locally, that's one issue in how we contain if and when there is a case detected in Belize. But what I'm saying is, we are already seeing in North America especially, where people are fearful of traveling, which means our current projections for tourism may not even materialize.
I agree with you totally. I agree with you
It doesn't,
totally.
I mean, we could have no
So-
cases, but if nobody wants to get on a plane because they're scared of who's coughing next to them, I mean, rightly so.
I would, come budget time, I'm going to be suggesting seriously that government relooks at its aggressive infrastructure, especially let's start with the road to Caracol. Maybe we could do some of the road from Georgeville all around Comoron to Santa Elena, that portion where people live, that's heavily populated. They need it, God knows they need it because the road is bad. But from the junction to Caracol, man, that's not a national priority. I'm sorry. Take some of that money, right? Or allocate some of those funds somehow. Work with your international partners and say, look, we need to have a plan. We need to have a plan. How many people, Marlene, you talk about quarantining for 2 weeks. How many people can afford to stay home for 2 weeks? And then, how many people have one separate room in their house? When they could say, okay, I'm going to lock up myself in this room, make uno no catch it. Most people, a lot of people, at least where I come from in the south side of this city, live in 1 or 2 rooms.
Yeah.
That's true.
And you have 6, 7, 8 people. How do we plan to deal with these people?
Yeah.
We can't just sit down and say, well, we'll wait and see if it comes. No, you have to have a plan in place. And you have to tell people so that people stop this fear-mongering. A lot of it is fear of the unknown, and rightly so.
Well, I think it's a natural reaction.
Yes,
yeah.
it's a natural reaction.
But so
when you see big countries like the pictures coming out of Wuhan and China of cities just deserted, you know.
Look at
Cities
Italy,
deserted.
which is very reliant
which are
on
big
tourism.
tourism place.
Yeah.
Israel,
So,
you know, they're closing down.
But that's
they're
the
taking
question.
precautions. What are our plans?
but that's the question that I am bringing to you. This has always been, I know, a part of the concern when the country becomes so reliant on tourism, because right this year it's the new coronavirus. It could be a storm that has
right.
devastating
But we've
effects.
said this
And so
before.
because of the sensitivity of a tourism industry being your main income driver, we're facing perhaps one of our first challenges. Now, we don't know. Maybe it all goes away in 2 weeks and we're fine.
Look, Belize
But
has
there's no
always
guarantee.
prided itself as having this diversified basket.
Yeah.
And we have allowed one basket to get too strong, and the other, first you have the tourism basket, then you have government spending. Those are the big things that
Yeah.
are driving our economy,
Yeah.
to the detriment of the productive sector. And that has been falling and
Yeah.
falling and falling, and our exports have been getting dismal. And while they should be growing so we could employ more people, while we should be producing more, consuming more locally produced things in Belize, we're importing more and more and more, which puts us, now you come to this situation now, if we lose the tourism, where are we going to get the foreign exchange? One time we boasted we had foreign exchange of $1 billion, okay? Now that has been cut in half. So let us say we have the flows from tourism being cut. How long can we sustain this now? How many months can we?
And
We
even
have right now,
where
they
is-
claim
where is
3
the
months worth of
promise?
foreign exchange, and when that is exhausted, what we do?
Where's
So we have not, and we have warned, we've not, and the international community has warned, we have not been making provisions for these shocks.
So yeah, you're saying
That could come.
diversification in terms of if we're to think of someone who catch and kill, for example, they do different types of jobs, but then you become reliant on just one that is only good on a sunny day, and then we go into the rainy season.
Exactly.
How are you going to
national
sustain yourself?
savings.
So I'm just trying, because people, we want people to understand why it's important to pay attention to these things beyond how it affects us directly. It also has an impact on the economy, and anything that happens with the economy then comes back to us. So we're going to discuss a bit some of the agriculture issues too, because that is also a very critical driver in our economy, but we have to take a break. So we'll take a break, and we'll be back in a few, so please stay tuned.
When someone you love becomes a memory, the memory becomes a treasure. Channel 5 introduces the Daily Obituaries. The Daily Obituaries will broadcast all death and funeral announcements and memorials to honor your loved one's life and memories. The Daily Obituaries airs on Channel 5 prior to the evening newscast, with subsequent repeats at 10 p.m. and 12 noon the following day. It will also be placed online on our social media platforms, all for a standard package fee. Celebrate their lives and memories with Channel 5's Daily Obituaries. Honor in life and reverence in death.
And welcome back to the second part of our discussion this morning with Senator Mark Lizarraga on the 2020-2021 budget. Let's.
You were asking me about.
Well, I wanted to talk
National-
about agriculture
Okay.
because we also.
I think you want to talk about national
No,
security.
I do want
Let's
to
go
find out some of the
agriculture.
interest.
Yeah.
Let's look at national security.
Wait, let me go back to agriculture because it continues
Okay.
in the path. So we talked about looking at potential challenges that may come in the tourism sector because of the global outbreak. But one of the definite areas where we'll see challenges is in the agricultural sector because we are predicted for another extended drought. We saw the devastating effects of last year. Talk to me about what's being projected currently, investments made in agriculture, as far as you have seen so far.
Well, there are a few bright spots in agriculture. Yeah. I understand we're having a new soursop industry growing with big acreages. I understand we have a couple of plants being put in for coconut export and stuff like that. But we still don't have enough diversification in agriculture, and the main things have been taking a hit. Sugar has been doing a little better because, I mean, the volume of sugar coming out of Belize, when you compile it now, has gone up some. But our main stays, the bananas and the citrus, example, we lost papayas. Bananas and citrus still, I believe, need more of collaboration and strategy planning, serious planning, and even support. And I dare say even the word subsidy. Right? I know that's not a good thing to say, but we have to think long term. How strategic are these industries as foreign exchange earners and as employment machines for our country? So we need to start having serious conversations, man. Maybe some of that low-cost money that's available on the international market now could have been funneled in. You know, it's the same conversation I had with the Musa administration. I remember clearly when we got their first tranche of big money from Taiwan, we had a meeting with the Prime Minister at the chamber. We said, Prime Minister, take some of this cheap money and put it towards industry. Take some and put it to housing, but funnel some of it towards industry so that we could create the jobs for the people to be able to afford to pay back for their homes. Of course, that wasn't done. All was put into housing. But I'm saying no, we need to start thinking like this as partners in development. The government can't think that it can continue to drive this economy through infrastructural development only. That's a farce. It's putting us into debt, unsustainable debt, and we're not prepared for these shocks that could come around. We're not prepared for the social shocks, the health shocks, the natural disaster shocks, the economic shocks. We're not prepared. We don't have no savings as a country because we live hand to mouth, right? So, and you want to bring that down to people's homes? I mean, how many of us can live for 2 or 3 weeks if our economy is affected seriously and we have to self-quarantine, for example? You know, who's going to pay for it? How will businesses absorb that cost if I have to be closed? What are the plans? Does Social Security have enough money for cover that kind of eventuality? Will the government be subsidizing businesses as other people are saying, that other countries are saying that they'll do? We have to have the discourse. We have to hit the pause button on infrastructure. Come together and say, look, this is how we plan to handle this. And I know something what the government just won't dictate. It has to be true partnership. In time of crisis, you have to have partnership and meaningful dialogue.
Can we expand, however, beyond focusing primarily on the coronavirus and what its potential impact will be, to look at other aspects of the budget? What else can we look at? Perhaps there's national security, that is one.
Well, let's look at national security quickly because you'd asked me about it. Last fiscal year we spent, prior fiscal year we spent $160 million on national security. Fiscal year we spent $155 million. Okay? You know what our budget for next year is? $154 million. And I have to question whether when the Prime Minister get up and say we're making all the necessary investments, are we increasing investments in security, we're increasing investments in, where is that coming from?
And we had the first intake this week.
Right?
In 3 years.
So
additional expansion of the police force, that is.
You could hear people say a lot of things, but this is where it comes down to. At the end of the day, this is where the rubber meet the road.
So it's actually less.
Yes. Okay. We've budgeted less this year for security
national security
than what we spent this year.
While we've been
And what we
talking,
spent the year before?
while we've been talking about crime
Right.
day in,
So has
day out.
crime in this country gone down? Is the crime situation better? The drug situation better? Our borders safer?
Can we get some of the breakdown for that 150?
I haven't looked at the breakdown. I'm just looking at the composites.
Yeah.
I just get the book over the weekend. And you had me working over my whole holiday weekend.
That's okay.
Right?
It's for the good of the people. So we're looking at, I mean, it's not a huge decrease. It's almost the same. You're getting the same money.
Remember
for
what I
last
said at the
year
beginning.
For this year.
Overall, all the ministries compiled spent $10 million less than they were allocated. Okay? But we had a $35 million overspend, and that all came from the Ministry of Works. $45 million, they bust the budget. So I'm saying to myself,
But, okay.
what urgent and unforeseen spending did we have to do in infrastructure? Urgent and unforeseen, guys, that when you want to bust your budget, that's how they
So let's
Yeah.
go in
finance and
let's
You
go
have
in
to
a
say
different-
something.
Yes, you have to
But
have an
let me-
urgent and
Different
unforeseen.
direction.
But let me go back to the infrastructure issue, and let's be very honest with ourselves in terms of what's happening. This is an election year. And the infrastructure investments, it's not just been this year alone, it's been for the past few years. But many argue that, and I'm just saying in general, no, that when you invest in infrastructure, there's more visibility in your investment, which is very helpful in an election year. In other words, if I am able to uplift 2 families in one community, the masses can't see that, but everybody can see a road. And that makes me look good on election day.
Well, you are more of a political animal than I am. I thought that the purpose of government was to help its people improve their lives, improve their security, lift their
Yeah,
standard
but
of
you've
living.
been involved long
improve their
enough to
health.
know that our politicians simply work to get elected again.
Well, that's true. That's absolutely true, and that's why I pointed out those 2 things. And it's unfortunate. It really is. I want to say, come back to today. Today we're going to the Senate to have a validation bill. Talk about infrastructure. You know, for years we've been saying that we should be getting the contracts in Parliament, so we know what we're getting or expecting for our monies invested in infrastructure. Well, Prime Minister has submitted, I think, 6 contracts, thereabouts. Some $290 million worth of contracts, some 1,400 pages of documents, which we just received. No, we haven't had the time yet to scrutinize and peruse and all of that, and our technical team will be doing that soon. But my point is this: that we've seen these spendings over and over and over again, and we've cautioned and said, look, the law says you have to make these submissions, and they haven't done so. The law says so and so and so. And time again, we've seen the government ignore sound advice from the social partners and from other partners in the Senate. We've seen it in the past with the Petrocarib spending. We're seeing it now. The Contractor General had warned of this in all his reports since 2000 and whenever, 8,
Yeah.
I think. So we have a government here that is hell-bent on doing what it wants to do. And then when it gets itself in trouble because the international partners pressure, or because somebody pressure or threaten legal action, then they go to Parliament and they erase all their mistakes retroactively. So I'm hoping, because it is an election year, coming back to your point, that they will begin to see the error of their ways.
Let me go in a different direction, though.
and have meaningful change. I'm going to hold my breath because we've been
Is there
expecting
an
a change.
allocation for UNCAC this year?
I haven't even seen that yet.
Let's go in a different direction here quickly. So you have BTL, you have BEL. Both are owned by the government and the people of Belize. Let's look at the performance
10
in
years
terms
now
of what
since
has
they-
been what has been earned or what has been projected to be earned for us?
In 2017, 2018, both of these companies, which by the way, we have invested in BTL alone, I think over $1 billion. BL, I don't know, it could be probably less than 200 million or something like that. I stand to be corrected. Anyhow, 2017, 2018, we had dividends from BTL and BL combined of some $16.9 million. This year, you know how much we had? $2.7 million. And you know how much we have projected for next year? $2.7 million. And the year after that, 2.8 and 2.8. We would have done better having this money. It's a 0.3% interest and returns. I said it before, we'd have done better. They put this money in the credit unions, make them lend poor people at subsidized rates. We could have give people money at 1% for building houses where you know the bill. If you look at the Ministry of Housing, they had a budget of $100,000 for grants, and instead they give 3,000 and odd people grants. They work out to like $30 per housing grant. Please.
It's laughable.
We serious?
Yeah.
We serious? And then if you look at how much money we use to run that ministry, we spent $1.7 million this year for run a ministry that only had $100,000 in grants, in projects. Tell me if that's not a joke. But this year, housing assistance will be $2.5 million.
Because it's an election year.
Next year,
Well, it doesn't say that there, but what is the projection for next year? Back to
1
normal?
million.
So you've
So-
noted at least two spikes for this year, human development and housing, where they're both going up to 2.5 million. Human development is increasing their budget from 400,000 or 500,000 the year before to 2.5 this year. Next year back to 500,000.
Right.
Housing is going up from
100,000 to 2.5.
to 2.5 and then down to 1 million next year.
Yeah. Actually, I misled you. Housing
Okay.
assistance
Don't
was
do that.
$3,500 this year. And it's going to 2.5 million.
Wow.
Okay? The other one was home improvement and grants. That was 100,000. Okay? And that's going to 190,000. Okay? So, I mean,
What does that indicate to you?
it just games as usual, you know, lip service, yeah, and politics, as you say. I mean, it's obvious. This ministry has been spending, we've been saying it for years, almost $2 million a year with very little or no project money. And then come an election year, you give it $2.5 million. You know?
Are there any bright spots that you have seen so far? Something that looks promising that has been put forward in the budget?
I haven't found anything that thus far.
Oh.
I'll be honest with you. I mean, we continue to project borrowing to balance our budget. This year, while we projected to borrow $132 million, we were short $132 million. We will actually end up borrowing $150 million. And next year, which is an election year, guess how much we will borrow? $100 million more than we had budgeted for this last fiscal year. We project a deficit of $232 million.
Next year being for the municipal cycle, right?
Next year being for 2020, 2021, this budget.
No, yeah.
We
you
propose
said-
to borrow $232 million to balance our budget.
No, but you were saying earlier
He
next
said
year
this
being
year,
an
as in
election
this
year.
financial year, will finish.
We just passed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the end of this month.
Yeah.
Stand corrected.
Yeah.
So we budgeted for 132 this last financial year, well.
Yeah,
Okay.
which ends this month.
Yeah, which we spent 150, projected to come in at 150. This new year, 2020-21, that's about to start, we're projecting we're going to have a shortfall at $232 million.
Now here's
You
a
see?
question.
And then after that, we're
The Prime
projecting.
Minister on Thursday lauded this budget, and it is his final budget presentation.
He's going out with a bang, isn't he?
Yeah. What are your thoughts based on having now looked, even if it's from a cursory point of view, at this particular budget against what was celebrated, if I may, in the House on Thursday?
Look, we continue to spend more than we budgeted for. We continue to borrow more than we budgeted for, and we continue to see our GDP falling in a recession. That's a recipe for disaster. That's nothing to be proud of, as far as I'm concerned, if you're in charge of the finances of this country.
So I
buoyed
wanted
against
to
the fact that there's no new taxes.
approach the question differently, because the budget isn't final as yet. There is the budget debate coming up.
Please, Marlene.
I agree, but I am still saying people are listening, and we do have power in ourselves as well. The issue is, what can be done? So we're looking at 3 quarters of decline. We're looking at the impacts of last year's drought, the impacts of this year's drought, whatever potential impact will be from the outbreak. We have a very large public wage bill. I don't think anybody would even dream of saying reducing or retrenchment, as we saw many, many years ago. So, in other words, what else can be done to improve the economy, or at least put it back on a better footing, given the raw materials that you have in front of you?
Look, I think that the Chamber and the network of NGOs and the unions are on the right track. They've said that, look, we have to look at some serious fundamental flaws in our democracy. We have to deal with strengthening of our integrity commission. Too many times we see people go into public office and come out rich. We have to deal with the office of the contractor general so that we could have meaningful scrutiny of these contracts to make sure we get value for money, that we're getting the works that we're paying for. We have to have strengthening of the office of the attorney general and making them independent, and we're saying truly independent. First call on the budget, truly independent in every sense of the word, so that she could control movement and training of her staff, etc. Okay, not fair that lady spend a lot of time to try train people and then public service move them, or could put in who they want. We're saying that we have to have true independence of our law enforcement agencies. How many times we've seen our law enforcement agencies muzzled when it comes to taking action against people that have really broken the law? We know it. Okay? And we're saying the same thing with the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Financial Intelligence Unit, and the election management bodies. Okay? So until we can address these structural issues that we have, that politicians have taken advantage of, really, we're not going to see change. I'm hoping that this year, what can we do this year? We have a reallocation. We have a serious, I'm hoping that we have serious debate, and that at the end of the debate, the government will say, look, again, because it's an election year, the government will say, look, we've decided to relook at this thing, and we're going to make it more people-centered than infrastructural centered. We have to work with industry and business because of 2 things. One, because of the fall in exports or production, numbers keep going down. And 2, because we could take a big hit if we have this coronavirus thing. And 3, because that's what we should be doing to create employment, because we have a low productivity in our country due to the amount of people that can't find enough jobs. The great portion of which are women, by the way. Right? Great portion. This report.
And while unemployment rates have declined, the bigger issue is underemployment.
Yes.
So we have people, because you're technically employed if you work 1 hour for the week.
And the amount of productivity you get from the workforce. That as well. So I'm hoping that we have a true budget debate. And I was being cynical when you say the budget hasn't been passed yet.
We all feel that way sometimes.
Because I have not seen, since I've gone there, I lie, because I've seen it change. I've seen at the last minute another paper come in on a sheet of paper that allocated more. That I've seen. But I have not seen a paper that would come and say, we're going to spend less or we're reallocating. I haven't seen that. So I'm hoping that when we have these debates in another couple of weeks, that the government will by that time will know more about what's happening in the corona world, and the government could come to the business community, to the population, and say, look, I'm going to have a plan to deal with this emergency, although I believe we're living in an emergency today, an economic emergency, by the way, a crime emergency, right? a cost of living emergency, a housing emergency, but we're dealing with this health-related emergency, and this is the plan, and this is the stimulus we have,
Yeah.
and this is how we plan to shore up businesses, this is how we plan to deal with any eventuality, and come to the people and say, this is what you have to do, and this is what we will do, to give people that security, that we're not in a panic mode and a mode where we don't know what's going to happen in our country, you know.
Well,
This is time for leadership to step up, you know.
and I acknowledge your cynicism, because I think a lot of times people feel that way, but that's the purpose of these conversations, that we can all open our eyes to what is actually in the budget, what it means, where it may help us, where we perhaps need better focus, and that we can start those conversations as well. Senator Lizarraga, we always appreciate you taking the time to do your research and coming and having this conversation with us.
You made me work over the weekend.
That's all right. It's for the good of the people.
Thank you very much, as always, for having me on the show, Sonny and
problem.
Marlene. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we are in Women's Month, and we're going to be talking about a Women's Sports Summit. After the breaks, please stay tuned.